Some breaking news, the Supreme Court has finally ruled on the question that we've been waiting for in one of the most consequential decisions of our lifetimes. On the question of whether or not Donald Trump had immunity to commit crimes with impunity as president, the Supreme Court has ruled that a president has immunity for official acts, but not for unofficial acts, and that the question should be remanded back to the trial court for further proceedings. Here's what that means. Simply put, it means more delay. The justices will direct Judge Chutkan to hold more hearings to see whether any of the acts alleged in Trump's indictment might enjoy some sort of outer perimeter immunity. And of course, what that actually means will be up to the discretion of the Supreme Court. So now it'll be up to Judge Chutkan to hold these hearings and then return the question to the Supreme Court for them to rule further. You've heard the expression, justice delayed is justice denied. This is the embodiment of that quote. To be clear, the whole basis for this case is utterly insane, even for this Supreme Court that is so nakedly in the tank for Donald Trump. Remember, what Trump was claiming was that as president, he had carte blanche to commit criminal acts with impunity, namely seeking to defraud the United States, prevent Americans from exercising their right to a free and fair election, and attempting to block the counting of electoral votes in Congress. In fact, far from contending that a president should have immunity for criminal activity, he contends that a president needs to have immunity for criminal activity.
And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity, and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong, I'm working for the country. And I worked on very hard on voter fraud because we have to have free elections. We have to have strong borders, we have to have free elections. Those two things almost above all. And we found tremendous voter fraud. We have a list of it. We have some findings if you want it. The press doesn't like reporting it, but we found tremendous voter fraud, determinative voter fraud. But we worked on that. That's what I was doing. And they were talking about after. Well, nothing has to do with after I left. It was during the time. And that was what they really focused on today during the appeal. And they concede that, and everybody concedes that. And if it's during the time, you have absolute immunity.
He's couched this whole bogus argument in this idea that his criminal behavior was warranted because he won the 2020 election, and so he needed to do whatever was necessary to prevent purportedly rigged results from being certified. Only, small problem, there was no voter fraud, and certainly not, as he claimed, determinative voter fraud. You know how I know? Because the Trump campaign and its allies brought 65 court cases forward, and in zero were they able to prove a modicum of fraud, far less any degree of fraud that would have actually changed the outcome of the election. And that includes in front of at least 8 judges who Donald Trump himself appointed. And the Supreme Court also refused to take up a single case related to the 2020 election results, even despite the fact that the court is 6-3 conservative and includes 3 justices who, again, Donald Trump appointed. So either the entire judiciary, including Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh, along with a raft of other federal judges, are all part of a deep state plot to deprive Donald Trump of his rightful win in the 2020 election, opting instead to cater to the deep state Democrats who conspired to help Joe Biden, or Donald Trump just lost and was so desperate not to seem like a loser that he invented a fantasy that the election was stolen from him out of whole cloth. Take all the time you need with that one. Trump has also been hinging his argument on claims like this, quote, without presidential immunity, a president of the United States literally could not function. It should be strong immunity, where proper decisions can be made, where our country can be powerful and thrive, and where opponents cannot hold up and extort a future president for political gain. It is a big decision, an important decision, a decision which can affect the success or failure of our country for decades to come. We want a great country, not a weak, withering, and ineffective one. Strong presidential immunity is a must. So that we're clear, not only could a president function without criminal immunity, but every single president in the history of the United States has somehow managed to function without it. There hasn't been a single president who has availed himself of this non-existent criminal immunity. And yet somehow, Trump is trying to gaslight us into thinking that it's impossible to be president without it. Here's a hint. The only people who argue that you need criminal immunity to do your job are criminals. And what's more criminal than this hypothetical situation laid out by federal appeals court judges who recognize that the natural conclusion of Trump's insane claims of full presidential immunity was that a president could have his political opponent assassinated with zero repercussions?
The president ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. That's an official act in order to SEAL Team 6?
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
What if you weren't? There would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that?
Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison and our constitutional tradition and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is
no. My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which would require impeachment and conviction by the Senate. In these exceptional cases, as the OLC memo itself points out from the Department of Justice, you'd expect a speedy impeachment and conviction.
And not for nothing, but if you find yourself arguing that you should be able to have people killed, you're probably not on the right side. And so given all of this, for the Supreme Court to continue humoring this insanity by remanding the case back to the trial court to further engage in this nonsense is a testament to just how broken and how in the tank they are for this criminal politician. The whole process has reeked of corruption, from taking it up after it was properly adjudicated by both a trial court and an appeals court, then handing Trump over 100 days of delay by refusing to rule on it until the literal last day of their term, and then giving Trump yet further delay by remanding it back to the trial court. The only way the Supreme Court could be more helpful to Donald Trump is if they argued this case on his behalf too. And so now the question becomes, what happens next? Here's my Legal Breakdown co-host Glenn Kirshner discussing the possibilities and how much more delay might be on the horizon.
Frankly, I think the Supreme Court is going to give Donald Trump the delay he so desperately covets by remanding it to Judge Chutkan with directions to hold some more hearings and decide whether any of the acts alleged in the indictment might be within a president's official duties, even if they dwell on the perimeter of those official duties. So let's break it into two parts now. If there is a remand with a direction from the Supreme Court to hold more hearings, that will basically look like one of two things. And depending on which one of these things is involved, I think we're looking at two very different time frames. Let's assume that they remand it to Judge Chutkan and they say, Judge, we want you to go through each act alleged in Donald Trump's indictment, give the parties an opportunity to argue, the parties meaning the defense attorneys and the prosecutors, to argue whether each act is or is not an official presidential act. Is it within the scope of a president's official duties, even out on the outer perimeter of those official duties? Hear arguments from the parties, make your ruling, your factual findings, and then return it to us for further proceedings in the Supreme Court. That could be done quickly. Brian, literally that could be done in a matter of weeks. Now, once it's returned to the Supreme Court, all bets are off. Who knows how long the Supremes will sit on it as sort of phase two in granting the delay that Donald Trump wants. But then the second alternative is if they return it to Judge Chutkan and they direct her to hold evidentiary hearings. An evidentiary hearing is different from the hearing I just described. The hearing I just described simply involves the parties, the prosecutors and the defense, arguing their respective positions, official duties, not official duties. But an evidentiary hearing means you have to begin to gear up to call witnesses to really drill down and develop the evidence that pertains to each one of these acts of Donald Trump to discern whether they're official acts, not official acts, outer perimeter acts, or beyond the outer perimeter. If it bogs down with evidentiary hearings, the parties are going to have to, amass the evidence. They're going to have to get the witnesses lined up. There's going to have to be testimony, direct examination, cross-examination, redirect, and it will be a very long, drawn-out affair. That will guarantee that it will not be returned to the Supreme Court anytime soon.
And of course, today we're going to be doing even further analysis on this point, so if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. So at this point, the Supreme Court has effectively done Trump's bidding and all but guaranteed that he won't stand trial for his democracy-busting crimes before the November election. All of which underscores this point. If you think the Supreme Court is broken now, it will be so much worse if Trump wins in November and nominates two young replacements for Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who are both in their mid-70s and who are virtually guaranteed guaranteed to retire if Trump wins. That will mean entrenched Republican rule on the court for the rest of our lives. We have one chance to stop that, and to prevent further miscarriages of justice like the one we saw today, and that is by showing up in November in numbers like we've never shown up before. So turn your anger into action, make sure you have a plan to vote, and send a message to the Supreme Court that its days enabling Trump and Republicans' corruption are going to come to an end. I've got a really exciting announcement. I've written a book. It's called Shameless. This book explores how Republicans have exploited their historical branding while attacking our democracy, how the media has proven itself a willful participant, and how Democrats can learn from this to rebalance the political scales and save our democracy. It has been a lifelong dream of mine to write my own book, and so I'd like to ask you to pre-order it by clicking the link right here on the screen. And if you buy within this pre-order period, your book is going to come with a signed nameplate. As you know, I've never had a single sponsor on my channel. I don't ask for money or anything like that, but if you're looking for a way to support me, this is hands down the best way to do it. So again, follow the link right here on the screen, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for pre-ordering Shameless. And as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of my content.